and then all those healthy relationships, that fuels you to then run a good business. But at the end of the day, none of this shit matters. This is just what we do to make money. The stuff that really matters is our health and our relationships and our family anyway. So focus on taking care of those, delegating everything except genius, and then work in those areas of the business that are going to give you the highest return on investment.
Hey, everybody, welcome back. It is your favorite time of the week. It's Wednesday, and Wednesday means another episode of Leaders Talk. And as usual, I am your intrepid host, Andrew Dupy, Chief Relationship Officer. And today I have a very special guest. I have Cameron Herold. So if you haven't heard of Cameron before, Cameron is the founder of the COO Alliance and Second in Command podcast, and as well as the author of 5 books. And you know, books are in our wheelhouse, so we're going to be having some good discussion on that. He's an international public speaker, and by the age of 35, get this, he already built his first 2, not 1, but 2 $100 million companies. And at 42, he engineered 1-800-GOT-JUNK spectacular growth from $2 million in revenue to $106 million in revenue. Cameron, that is an amazing beginning to our podcast. It's one heck of a CV. So tell our audience a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'll give you an update as well now. I actually have my 6th book, just came out a couple months ago now as well. So I never even thought I'd be a writer. I think I like having books written, but not the process. The process is tough. But yeah, I've written 6 books now. Well, what else can I tell you about myself? I really have been groomed as an entrepreneur. Grew up in an entrepreneurial family. My brother, my sister, and myself have all run our own companies forever. I was the second in command for 1-800-GOT-JUNK. I took them from 2 million to 106 million in revenue in 6 years. And that was actually the 4th company that I'd grown. Left there 16 years ago now. And I've been working behind the scenes with high growth companies all over the world. I've been paid to speak now in 28 countries and on every continent. And my wheelhouse is really everything to do with the second in command. So my newest book is called The Second in Command, and it's how to unleash the power of your COO.
Excellent. So, you know, there's a really simple question. What's the secret? What's the secret to that kind of success that you've been able to achieve apparently over and over again? I mean, what can we learn from you right now?
I think I'll give you a couple of them. One is simplicity, right? I think that we tend to overcomplicate things and think that it must be difficult, business in general. Business is really simple, right? Listen to your customer, really treat your employees great, really obsess about happy employees and happy customers, charge enough for your product that everybody can make money at it, and just stay focused, right? Focus on the critical few things. So keep it simple, focusing on the critical few things versus the important many, right? There's all kinds of distractions and all things we could be doing, but saying no more often than we say yes is another. Right. And then I think also really kind of figuring out, as Jim Collins talked about, your flywheel, right? What's the one area that if you really push on, if you really focus on, will spin that momentum machine for you? And it's really about finding that and staying focused on that.
And then how do you communicate that to others? I mean, you know, you can have that philosophy. You can say, you know, I'm going to stay focused. I'm going to do this. How, though, do you communicate that to a general audience to drive business, to drive growth?
Well, one is with my team, is making sure that my team understands that as well, right? So I think often leaders, especially Gen Y and Gen Z leaders, they're nervous about saying no. Whereas the baby boomers, right? I'm Gen X, but baby boomers were good at saying no. Their parents said no all the time. So we need to get better at saying no and not worrying about hurting someone's feelings. It's about delivering the no in a way that they understand. So what I like doing is aligning everyone with my vivid vision, so everyone can see what my company looks like, acts like, and feels like in the future, and they know the direction we're going in. So when I say no to something, they understand it's because it's not aligned with our vivid vision, right? Or it doesn't leverage our key capacities. It's not necessarily going to get us the ROI that we need. So it's not like I'm saying, no, you're an idiot. It's no, that idea or that system or that project isn't necessarily the best use of our people, time, and money to get us the highest ROI in the simplest way, right? So I say no to complexity, and I believe that momentum creates momentum. I think so often we try to put these big, hairy projects in place where something very small and very simple is going to yield results for years.
Yeah, I mean, it's that old adage, good business begets good business. Um, yeah. So thinking about that from the position then of a COO, somebody that has to actually, I like to call it the North Star of a company. You know, you have to have something that's a united guiding influence that actually influences everybody. What's the role of a second in command in building that kind of a concept?
Well, I'll give you one that is a great North Star that aligns everyone. And I think it aligns with our listener. It's about growing people.
Yeah.
And I think very often the business leader, whether it's the CEO or the COO, they're reading lots of books, they're listening to podcasts, they're joining masterminds, they're getting coaching. Well, that's great for you. But what about for all of the leaders and managers in your company? What about for all the employees in your company? Like, are you growing them? Do you have a book club? Do you give them a chapter of a book to read? Do you get them coaching? Do you engage them in a mastermind? Like, I recently launched a mastermind community called the Ops Spot, and it's for anybody who works in any operations roles. So managers, directors, VPs, it's a community for them online, right? We've got the COO Alliance as a community just for second in commands. I launched a course called Invest in Your Leaders, which are the core leadership skills that every manager needs to be good in. You can read books, you can send them off to conferences. The reality is if leaders, if COOs and CEOs focus more on growing all their leaders, all their managers, that's what's going to grow the company. And I think too often the CEO is only focusing on growing themselves. I remember years ago, I was coaching a company called Blue Grace Logistics. I helped them go from 40 employees up to about 600 employees in 4 years. And I was teaching one of these skills that's in my Investing in Leaders course to Bobby, their CEO. And he said, "Oh, this is amazing. This is going to change the company." I said, "No, it's not. It's going to change your productivity. But what will change the company is teaching this system to all of your managers and leaders in your company." And I think that's what the COO needs to focus on as a North Star, is the more that we grow our people, right? The more that we grow their skills and their confidence, they're going to scale the company for us.
Yeah, because I mean that's the thing. You can't do it yourself, and I think that there is a problem sometimes with entrepreneurial spirited people that they feel like they have the weight of the world on their shoulders all the time, and they're the ones that have to carry it all the way to the finish line. Maybe lose sight of the fact that it's the team that you're going to build that's really going to be the one that gets you there.
Yeah, and it like I've always said that it needs to get done, but not by me. Like my to-do list doesn't have my name on it. It's just a list of things that need to get done. So then who can I delegate them to? I remember years ago, I was coaching this woman, Suzanne Evans, and she started on Sunday night. She would make a list of all the things that she needed to do the following week. Then she would go back and look at her list and she'd say how many minutes or hours each item on her list would take. So item 1, 40 minutes, item 2, 12 minutes, item 3, 2 hours, whatever. She'd have this list of 50 things that needed to get done that week. She'd add up the number of hours, and before she checked a single email or worked on any of those items, she would delegate 80% of the hours to other people. That's how you get shit done, right? How to get more done with less people faster is thinking about stop, optimization, automation, delegation, but not sitting down and working harder. And then I think so often entrepreneurs tell themselves the lie that I'm working tonight just to catch up, or I'm going to work this weekend just to catch up. You're never going to catch up. You're going to add more projects. You're going to set new goals. You'll buy a company, spin off a division, the company that you're not going to catch up. What you're doing is avoiding your spouse, avoiding your struggles, avoiding your insecurities, right? You're avoiding problems and filling it with the dopamine rush of business, but you're not catching up.
Yeah, and that can be a real problem in and of itself, though, can it? I mean, and when you do avoid those problems in your life, and you say, "Oh, well, I don't have time for my family, don't have time for this," that ends up being a real problem for your business, doesn't it?
Yeah, your health and your family issues end up destroying your business because you've ignored those. But if you take care of your health and you take care of your family and you take care of your relationships and you take care of yourself, right? Like the mens sana and corpore sano, the healthy mind and a healthy body, and then all those healthy relationships, that fuels you to then run a good business. But at the end of the day, none of this shit matters. This is just what we do to make money. The stuff that really matters is our health and our relationships and our family anyway. So focus on taking care of those, delegating everything except genius, and then work in those areas of the business that are going to give you the highest return on investment.
Gotcha. So I'm going to segue a little bit here, and I'm going to kind of circle back to something you said a little bit earlier. So you've communicated all of this in now 6 books that we've already kind of gone over. And this is, again, our wheelhouse. And you said earlier that, yeah, you may not have written everything yourself. Tell me a little bit about how those books came about.
No, I didn't say I didn't write everything myself. What I said is I didn't like the process of writing the book as much as
there we go.
having one written. Yeah, I find it, so I'm very good at speaking, and I've been paid to speak in 28 countries. So I'm good at standing on a stage and thinking out loud and riffing and covering all kinds of great content. But sitting down and typing something is very hard for me. So when I wrote my first book, Double Double, this was 13 years ago, I'd heard about something back in the day called dragon dictation. Now it'd be like, now it's using Siri, right? So I had a Bluetooth headset and I created a table of contents for my book, right? Here's the 12 or 15 chapters. And then for each chapter, I wrote down 5 or 7 bullet points I wanted to cover in that chapter. And then I literally put on my headset and I walked around and I talked. I just paced around my home, thinking out loud and capturing all my ideas. I sent those off to a woman back in the day that would take it and edit it because, we didn't have the editing features that we have with AI.
Right.
She edited it for me. And then I read each chapter and added to it, moved some stuff around, inserted some other ideas. Then I sent each chapter off to 3 different entrepreneurs. So 3 entrepreneurs read chapter 1, 3 other ones read chapter 2. I got their feedback and ideas, and we kind of went from there. That's the process I used to write all 6 of my books, was talking the content, getting the content transcribed, working with a great editor to have me polish it, and then making sure that I used my audience to tell me what was missing, where I'd gone too far. But I couldn't sit down and type, every single book.
Still, it's still that concept of some kind of delegation that you were able to use. Yeah.
And it was also a faster way for me to get the ideas out of my head where to say them. And then, look, the magic of a computer can type it for me. Now I can read what I typed, and then I can fill in the blanks.
So our audience, many of them are prospective authors. Many of them are thinking about making their first step into the world. So that's why I want to kind of cover that. Why did you write the books? What was the motivating reason for you to actually sit down and put them together?
Yeah, well, my first book was a very different reason than some of the future books. So I'll walk you through all 6 of them very briefly. The first book, Double Double, I wrote because a speakers bureau told me that if I had a book, they could get me higher speakers' fees. So at that day when I wrote that, I was getting $3,000 to $4,000 per speaking event. They said they could get me $10,000 if I had a book. Well, it worked. And now my speaking fee is $40,000 plus business class travel for a 1-hour event. I now get paid $10,000 to $15,000 for a 1-hour Zoom. So they were right. The book actually increased my brand, gave me visibility, and was a good marketing tool. So that was number 1. The second couple books that I did Meetings Suck, Vivid Vision, and Free PR. I realized that the content I had that were merely chapters of Double Double really needed to be expanded on to give a lot more information around 3 really critical topics. Right. So I was able to take my content and build off of those. And those for me were an opportunity to educate more, and again, to build my brand and to get the message out to a bigger audience. So again, it was brand building. But all of my books I make money on. My 5th book, I was in a mastermind group called the Genius Network with Joe Polish, and Hal Elrod, who wrote The Miracle Morning for Entrepreneurs, walked up to me one day in the hallway and said, "Hey, do you want to co-author a book with me?" And I was like, "Yes, your brand is blowing up. My brand was doing well. Let's co-author The Miracle Morning for Entrepreneurs." So that was an opportunity because I was in the right room, right? I was paying to be in a mastermind that he was in as well. And then my last book, The Second in Command, really was one that I had to write. The audience was just asking for it. My members of the COO Alliance, all of the listeners of the Second in Command podcast, I've interviewed about 300 guests on that. All of that audience wanted more content on how to grow the relationship with the Second in Command. So that one really came out of a need to do it, not out of a desire to write one.
Gotcha. But see, you kind of already answered almost my next question. Many authors or many potential authors that, are in kind of positions like you, they're COOs, CEOs, business leaders, entrepreneurs, they ask the question, once I write this book, well, what now? Once I've got it in my hand, how do I find that right out? How do I get it the attention? How do I actually do something to turn this and monetize it? Because you and I both know that you don't write nonfiction for royalty sales.
Well, I make very good money off my books, but I'm fairly unusual, and I've been building my brand for a long time, right? I've been doing what I do for 16 years now, so I think people think, it takes a long time to get to the night before you become the overnight success story. But I'll give you a couple of specific things that I do to get my book out there. Number one, because I self-published all of my books, my cost for printing a book is very low. Right. So I can print a book for about $2.75 a book. So what I do is when I land a speaking event, I go back to them a week later and I say, oh gosh, I totally forgot to ask you about books. How many people will be at your event? And they come back and they go 400. I go, great. I'll send 400 books to you to give out to everybody, and I'll do a free signing at the end of the event. And I'll only charge you $10 per book, including shipping. Half of the audiences say yes. So I make about $6 a book. About half of the audiences say, nope, we can't afford it. So I go back to them and I say, I'll tell you what, I'll do it for $5 a book, including shipping. I'll barely make a penny, but at least everybody gets a book. I'd say about 25% of the audiences say yes to that. So now I've got 75% of my audiences getting a book, and I'm making money on most. The 25% that still can't do it, I said, you know what? I really want to blow everybody away. I'm sending you the books, my cost, my treat. Let's do a book signing. Let's wow everybody. And they all say yes to that. So every single speaking event that I've done for the last probably 11 or 10 years, everyone in every audience has always gotten copies of the book. That's pushed my brand to another level.
Yeah.
I'm currently doing something right now where if you're a COO or a CEO of a company doing at least $5 million or greater in revenue, I will send you a copy of my book, The Second in Command, for free, and I'll even pay for the shipping. Because again, I know that my cost per book out, even with shipping, is about $6. That's a rounding error compared to if I land one client that pays for, 1,000 books being sent out the door. So I understand the model of, can I make money, and then can I kind of build it out from there?
Yeah, and that is actually really gets down to the heart of what I was asking. And then you also going into podcasting, you're doing speaking. How do you integrate those kind of things? Because I know a lot of people also have that question. If I have a book, should I support it with a podcast, or should I use something to actually get out and get in front of people? How do you just use your podcast to support what you do?
It's so different from everybody, right? I think the vast majority of people should never do a podcast, right? You don't have an audience for it. It's going to be a distraction for you. You don't necessarily have the content to be able to share. My podcast, The Second in Command, I never interview an entrepreneur. I only interview their COO, because we've heard all the entrepreneurs' stories, but we haven't heard the story of the person behind the scenes, right? It's like we've always heard dad's story, but we never heard mom's story. I want the rest of the story. So for me, it also serves a purpose, right? I have a community called the COO Alliance. I've got members that are COOs from 17 countries. There's a very strategic reason. If I land one member, that's $9,000 a year. I can do a podcast without ever having to sell advertising because it fuels my marketing. So there's a strategic reason for me to be able to do stuff. But for if you're a home builder, don't do a podcast. So I think most people should stop the insanity of just focusing on another idea of what somebody else is doing, and begin, as Stephen Covey taught us, begin with the end in mind and work backwards. What's the goal? What are you building? How do you reverse engineer that? And is podcasting, a vehicle? Now, writing a book, every single entrepreneur should write a book. It is irresponsible of you in a day like today to not have a book, to elevate your brand, to share your ideas, to use as a marketing tool, but you're delusional to think that you're going to retire off of writing one book, unless you're someone like a Simon Sinek. I've known Simon for, Simon used to sleep on my couch. So Simon Sinek and I have been friends since 2004. He was on our board of advisors at 1-800-GOT-JUNK. It's like, that's a rare person to be the Simon Sineks or the Jim Collins. So think strategically about what are you doing, what's the return on your investment, and is writing but writing a book is a better return than running a podcast for sure, for most people.
Exactly. What resources would you suggest to new authors? Maybe some of the ones that are in our audience that are listening, or somebody that's in a position like you that they want to actually put something together. What should they be looking at before they actually sit down and begin to produce a book?
I would go out and find 5 or 10 really great books and sit down with them and look through them. Don't read them as a book, but flip through them and notice what jumps out at you. The covers feel nice. The typesetting looks good. There's no spelling and no grammar mistakes, and the print quality is really strong. The cover design is freaking amazing. It doesn't look like some schlocky 17-year-old made it, off of Fiverr.com or 99 Designs, right? The good books look good, feel good, they smell good. So make sure that the book you're producing feels that way. If you pick up any of my books, they pass the test like that. Gotcha. But it's because I sat down with great books and looked at them, and then I looked at a bunch of bad ones. I'm like, wow, you can really see the difference. Like a shitty book looks and feels shitty. Right.
Yeah, that's just it. You can actually, quality is so important with what you're actually going to be producing, because you can't just put something on a shelf that is junk and expect it to become gold.
Well, it's also your brand. Is that really how you want to represent yourself? Like, if you dress like shit, then fine, put out a shitty book. But if you're trying to be a business person that's running a strong brand, then put out a book that represents you, like your website would, like your business cards of 20 years ago did, right? It has to look and feel like the rest of what you're doing. And I think some people really miss on that.
Yeah, I would agree with you. And hey, ladies and gentlemen, some of the books behind me, they look great. That's been one of our North Stars, as we discussed earlier. So Cameron, as we kind of start to wind down here, I always at the end of my show like to do a little bit of a segment of, we've had some really great information, a lot of practical information in this interview, but what's something we haven't covered, like a golden nugget, something that, you just really feel that our audience could immediately take, use, and actualize to just instantaneously improve their business and themselves?
Well, I'll give you 2. The first one is that it is more about growing your people than growing yourself, right? So if you can really sit down and take a look at who are your emerging leaders, who's the next generation of leaders coming up in your company, who are the current managers and leaders that are out there managing people, start focusing on growing their skills. Teach all of your managers how to do interviews. Teach them how to run meetings. Teach them about situational leadership and coaching and delegation and time management and handling conflict, right? Give them the core skills, even the skills that are in my Invest in Your Leaders course. Grow their skills and they'll grow your company. That's number 1. Number 2 is to remember that none of this actually matters. This is just what we do to make money. The stuff that matters is relationships with your friends and your family and your kids, because we're all just walking each other home. None of us are getting out of this alive. So spend time with each other, connecting with each other, connecting with what really matters, and stop the insanity of just focusing on business constantly.
Gotcha. Well, Cameron, how can our audience find out more about you?
Thanks, Andrew. Yeah, all of my books are available on Amazon, Audible, and iTunes. Definitely check out the Second in Command podcast. Anywhere you listen to podcasts, you'll subscribe. We also have a YouTube channel for both the COO Alliance and our Second in Command podcast that people should check out as well.
Excellent. All right, ladies and gentlemen, this was Cameron Herold. That's a lot of great practical information. Cameron, it was a great pleasure having you. We wish you the best of luck.
Thanks, Andrew. Appreciate it.